Welcome everyone to the MTN post-show debate. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mikenzie Frost from KTVH in Helena. Joining me tonight are our panelists from the debate earlier. We have Tim McGonigal from KRTV and KXLH. Next to us is Dr. Dave Parker, MTN's political analyst. And then we have Jay Kohn from KTVQ in Bozeman. And on the end, MTN's chief political reporter, Mike Dennison. Now, Mike, let's start with you tonight. Now, we just wrapped up the debate, hearing the questions and the answers from all three candidates. Who was the clear winner?
Well, I think a clear winner had to be Mark Wicks, the Libertarian. Not only because he got some great exposure statewide, probably for the first time in the campaign, but also because he answered the questions really well and directly. He was articulate, he was funny, I mean, he didn't dodge anything. He did a great job of differentiating himself from the other two candidates throughout the entire debate. So I think he was at least one of the clear winners here tonight. On the other side, between the two other candidates, the major party candidates, Mr. Gianforte, I thought, did a good job of getting out his talking points and defining himself as a conservative and as a backer of President Trump. And Mr. Quist, however, I thought he missed a lot of opportunities to clearly rebut some of the things being said about him that I think are probably false or misleading. I don't think he did a good job of rebutting some of those things and saying, well, here's what I stand for, as opposed to what Mr. Gianforte or other people are saying about me. And also I thought he was often more vague than it should have been. It should have been more specific in addressing some of the questions and some of the rebuttals that were out there.
Okay. All right, Mike. Well, thank you for those answers, and we will let you step aside so we can get a story from you this evening on your MTN station. Thank you. Now, let's turn our question to Jay. You moderated the event tonight. What were some of the surprises that you saw from these candidates?
One, I agree with Mike. I thought Mark Wicks did an exceptional job, and maybe it's because we haven't seen him. We didn't know what to expect from him. Maybe we thought he would just bumble his way through it, but he was refreshingly frank, and I think because none of us had really heard much from him, he kind of put the whole debate at ease. David, you and I were just talking, and maybe it was because they were sitting at a table versus the podiums. Sometimes the podium kind of singles out the candidates themselves. They were kind of elbow to elbow at that table, even though they were a little bit away from each other. But it seemed like a more relaxed atmosphere here tonight, and I think that played well for Mark Wicks. Rob Quist struggled a little bit to express his opinion. As Mike said, he may have missed some opportunities. I've watched Greg Gianforte debate 3 or 4 times now. He did not surprise me. I don't think he was quite as smooth tonight as I have seen him in some of the past governor debates that we had over the last year, but initially off the top of my head, that's what I think.
Any other surprises from either of you?
So I'm going to talk about Rob Quist for a moment. Rob Quist is a guy that's never done a debate before, like Wicks. And so in a lot of ways, he had a lot riding on this debate coming in here and getting exposure. And I think he basically came off as a nice guy that I think a lot of people want to see. Greg Gianforte in many ways had the most to lose because he's debated 3 times before. He's done face-to-state before, just like Rob Quist, but he's done these 3 different debates. And the thing is, I've noticed about Greg Gianforte in the governor's debate that happened earlier this year, late last year, and he came off as tense, and this mood in this room was much different. He came off as very relaxed. I thought he came off as smooth. Now, I think there's some answers that he gave that I'll disagree with in terms of what he said, but I thought he came off much calmer and approachable than he has in the past. It's really hard for me to pick a winner. I mean, Wicks in many respects had the most to gain, but I mean, I think they all in their way did well, and I think they accomplished what they had to accomplish.
I think Mark Wicks, if he had some sort of organization behind him, because again, this is the first time we've really heard from him, right. Any kind of organization and a longer, maybe a full campaign cycle, this guy might, I don't know if he would win the race, but I think he could really make some waves and possibly play more of a spoiler role and possibly even gain considerable votes. So he was refreshing. He had the sound bites of the night, and that's what I will take away.
Everybody has marijuana. Actually, it was one of the sound bites of the night.
So refreshingly frank. Yes. Refreshingly frank is correct. Now, we talked a little bit about some of the mistakes or some of the missed opportunities that Rob Quist and some of the other candidates had. Would you say that there were one big mistake that any of these candidates made tonight?
Mikenzie, I think I was a little too close to the forest. The trees as the moderator. I was more focused on who was getting the next question, who was supposed to rebut, and that in itself. But if anything, I didn't think Rob Quist did exceptionally well on the question of what did it have against the millionaires. I think he kind of brought it all together at the end of that where he said Montana's not for sale. I think he could have been stronger on that. He kind of beat around the bush a little bit there. Again, maybe a missed opportunity, but where I was concentrating on who was coming up next, it was hard for me to pick out a major mistake.
Trying to keep things in order is tough. Now, was there anything that the public learned that could be a game changer from tonight? Any sort of new information that we didn't know leading up to this point?
Well, I think they learned who Mark Wicks was. Yeah. I mean, that's a start right there. It's important. I mean, I want to go back to actually your earlier question about mistakes. One of the things that kind of, you look at this as a person who's engaged in science, and you look at the data from the scientists that study this, and there is no debate. Climate change is occurring, and there's a man-made element. And it's kind of difficult to look at this discussion saying, well, there was ice here, and now it's gone, and that's good. And the notion that Wicks said it's hard to find reliable data, you know, that's just not the case at all. And further the point about this war on coal, there was just a recent article that came out in Vox News looking at this, in a study that was done, is look, the reason why coal jobs have been lost is only about 4 or 5% of those jobs, and the effect on coal has come from those clean power rules. You know what the overwhelming effect is? Market forces, and the fact that China's importing less coal. So I think that answer is disingenuous as given by Republicans, and Mr. Gianforte gave that answer tonight. But the thing that was most effective for him, though, is that he focused on his engineering background, and I think that's something that people see as neutral and problem fixer, and he did that many times, and I think that is a positive for him.
There was also, and I think David, you brought this up, the question on Planned Parenthood, and especially about funding of abortions, and there was, I believe, some misinformation there from Mr. Gianforte.
Yeah, it's against, federal funds cannot be used to pay for abortions. End of story. The question that was asked was correct, and yet it was reiterated that Planned Parenthood uses federal funds for abortion. That's not the case. Planned Parenthood does provide abortion services, but not with federal dollars.
Right.
Right. Now, do you think that question is we're going to see that question again come up, and the topic has not gone away? It's nothing new for these candidates. What's the next step moving forward from this debate?
Well, for Mark Wicks, hopefully he'll repeat a lot of the good lines. I thought the best answer of the debate was his analogy of the cars, and you know, that he used the work truck with the chains and the tow and all the. So I thought there isn't a Montanan anywhere watching this debate that couldn't associate with, you know, you wanted to see Mark Wicks come over the hill if you're broken down after he got done explaining that. So I don't know what you thought, David, but that's the one answer that sticks out to me.
The difficulty of Mark Wicks is that you have to understand that this was his one shot, and does he have resources to back it up and go further? And that's the problem with him. So this might be his high water mark moving forward. But Rob Quist, again, remember, a lot of people know who he was, and this was a forum for him, and he came off in the way as a regular, nice guy. And if you want a regular, nice guy in Congress, he could fit the bill.
Yeah, he also brought up another line. He said, in the Affordable Care Act, the first lie is in the name, it's not affordable. Wicks, yeah. So he had lines like that. He had the analogy. He was just, again, he was really kind of a breath of fresh air in a lot of sound bites that we've heard in other stories and campaign commercials, and here comes Wicks, and like I said, sound bites of the night.
Definitely sound bites of the night.
Can I ask David a question real quick? One of the questions was to Mark Wicks, how can you convince voters tonight that a vote for you is not a wasted vote? How do you think he did there? I asked that question. I'm not sure I really got the answer I was expecting. What do you think?
This is the problem with third-party candidates, is that, you know, they don't win, and many times it can cause be spoilers. I think the issue here fundamentally is that he might pick up some additional votes, sure, but I think unless you have resources behind you, like Ross Perot did in 1992, even then, with those resources, you only got 19% of the vote. So I still think it's going to be hard for him to translate what he did tonight into momentum moving forward. I still think, you know, at the end of the day, it's a Quist Gianforte fight.
Right, I agree.
Could he be the spoiler? We saw the Rehberg and Tester come down to how much went to the third-party candidate in there. Really made the difference.
In that case, the Libertarian candidate wasn't the spoiler. A lot of people think he was. I mean, you have to basically assume that 80% or so of those votes would have gone to Denny Rehberg, and that's kind of a high bar. It's hard. I mean, theoretically, the Libertarian should pull some votes from Greg Gianforte a little bit.
Right.
But really, to be the spoiler, he's going to have to get like 15% of the vote, and I don't know if that's going to actually happen.
Not with 23 or 4 days left.
Yeah, not with so much little time left in the election.
Right, and with that little time left in the election, we saw some of the answers tonight, but what more do voters need to know from all three of these candidates before they cast their vote?
Well, I think that's their job. That's not my job, but I think, I guess maybe just feel more comfortable with that candidate representing them in Congress. With me and Mr. Gianforte, his financial success, are you comfortable? Does he have your same perspective on the issues? Rob Quist is someone that's really never represented anyone other than his music on stage. Are you comfortable with having him being your voice in the House? And the same with Mark Wicks, with people being exposed to him for the very first time. Are they comfortable with his positions?
What's interesting is that we have three candidates here that are not professional politicians, that have not served an elective office before. And so that's somewhat unusual. And here I think it's most of the flavor that you want. Do you want the successful businessman who brought jobs to Montana and made a lot of money? Do you want the guy who's been a poet, who's gone around with his voice and represents, and is from Montana, grew up here, and in a lot of ways reflects average Montanans? Or do you want this guy, Mark Wicks, who is a libertarian, who also represents another type of Montana as an agriculturalist, right, and a rancher? Which flavor of a person do you want that comes from very different professional backgrounds?
I think it'll be interesting to see if Mark Wicks ramps up the any advertising or any campaigning here in the next few weeks, and who knows, possibly this might be the favorable enough impression of this debate might propel him to run for office in the future.
Right, who knows, this could be his catapult to the future.
Nobody made a fatal error. I think that's true, and again, there was something to like about all the candidates, I thought, from where I was sitting here. And whereas I thought in the gubernatorial debate that we held here in the fall, Greg Gianforte came off very differently, and I thought Bullock, who I don't think is a very good debater, actually came into his own in that debate at the right time. And I thought it was close, but in this case, I thought there was something there for lots of people to see, depending on which lens you're seeing it through.
Right, Jay?
Well, I think one of the big, you mentioned moving forward, one of the questions is what's the Democratic National Party do with all their money? Will they continue to throw it in Mr. Quist's favor against Mr. Gianforte, given the other special elections in the country that have come out much closer than most people thought, kind of a reaction to the first 100 days of Donald Trump. So I don't know what David thinks. They've already put quite a bit of money in most recently, but after this debate, what do you think? Will that money continue to flow? One
of the things that I think people need to understand is that the organizations in Washington, not just the D-TRIP, but all the other special interest organizations, what they want to see is, has a candidate demonstrated and come close within the polls? So if they come in, that's a signal to us that Quist has made the race more competitive. I think he came onto the stage, I think he did a good job. Now the question is, do we see poll movement? And that poll movement then goes to the D-TRIP, and then you should start seeing money come in. So whether or not money comes in, I think is an indicator of whether Rob Quist has done the job in showing that he's made the race more competitive. The polls that we've seen have shown about a double-digit lead for Greg Gianforte. I would assume that if those polls tighten, then you're going to see that money come in to try to tip the balance in this race.
Any last thoughts this evening?
We haven't seen hardly any polls. Just this past week, we got the Everson College poll.
But that's it.
And I mean, it's been this big vacuum of where everybody's kind of guessing. I don't know if we're not an easy state to pull or what, but I know it's expensive. But
one of the most difficult problems is special elections are by their very nature very hard to pull. Remember, special is the opposite of general, right? So therefore, it's very hard to figure out what the turnout's going to be in a special election, and therefore it makes it hard to make these assumptions. We don't know if that 12 points or that 14 points or whatever you see there is real, because it depends upon the universe of voters that show up. Democrats are very energized. We've seen this around the country, so they might show up at disproportionate numbers. That's what the Quist campaign's hoping for.
Well, it's interesting because that was the debate over the mail ballot at the legislature. I mentioned in the debate tonight, there's only been 2 House special elections in Montana, one in 1946, one in 1969. The one that had the highest voter turnout was in 69, and John Melcher, the Democrat, won that by about 2,000 votes. In the one in 1946, only about a 48% turnout, and the Republican Wesley Dewart won that. So maybe Republican Party Chair Jeff Essman knows more than we give him credit for, as far as he believes a low voter turnout is going to help the Republican candidate. That's been the case, at least for the first 2 special elections a long time ago. I'm not sure what the case is this time.
Interesting history lesson.
Yes.
Thank you, Jay.
My pleasure, yeah. It was interesting to read.
It's an interesting situation we're in. We know that it's special, and we know that it's very rare. So
The key is,
see what
remember, May
happens.
25th, that's the day. Get your ballots, vote, show up and vote.
Right, it's a Thursday. Do you think it's going to have, people are not used to voting on a Thursday. Yeah. It was the first available date that we could hold this election as far as the Constitution.
Yeah, so it's unusual for a Thursday election. It's unusual at a special election, but I think the reason that Thursday election was chosen is, here's the deal, that's going to allow at least student voters, certainly in Montana State, we're going to finals week, they should get their ballots this week so that at least they'll be able to vote before they go home, and certainly the voters and the students in Missoula. So I actually think that was an effort to try to get a higher Democratic vote out before the students go home.
Yeah, that was another point. With all the students gone,
Yeah.
will they be engaged?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think that's all we have. Yes. So, thank you for joining us this evening, and you can be sure to watch Mike Dennison's full report on tonight's event on your local MTN station. For now, good night.